The first time Amanda met Jessica. She was 15 and holding a broken TI-83 calculator outside her algebra final. Jessica had fixed it with a paperclip and a safety pin. "Don't tell the teacher," she'd whispered. That was the beginning. 12 years later, Amanda stood in the center of her office's glass-walled conference room, staring at the spreadsheet that confirmed what her stomach already knew. Jessica hadn't just helped her cheat a math test. She'd just helped Daniel cheat Amanda out of her future. Amanda Chen, 27, co-founder and CEO of Quantum Mind, was a name whispered in pitch decks and tech blogs across the East Coast. Her startup, an AI-driven education platform aimed at closing achievement gaps in underserved school districts, had landed its first $1.5 million seed round. They were 2 weeks away from announcing their Series A, 2 weeks away from her wedding. 2 weeks away from a life she'd spent a decade building with the two people she trusted most. And now, both of them were gone. Not in a blaze, not in some dramatic confession. Just gone. It had started with little things. Files missing from shared folders. A calendar invite to a board meeting Amanda had never received. Questions from investors that hinted at things she hadn't announced. At first, she'd assumed it was just growing pains, the stress of expansion, the miscommunications of a fast-moving team. Until the email. She had clicked open the forwarded message from an angel investor who was confused about a new proposal sent under Amanda's name, a new deck, a new cap table, with Jessica listed as co-founder and Daniel as sole CTO. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was an erasure. The email had a trail of prior correspondence, timestamps, a Slack thread between Jessica and Daniel. Amanda read the texts once. Then again. Her hand trembled on the mousepad. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She sat still. They'd been building something on the side. Using her codebase. Using her networks. Using her name. Until they no longer needed it. Jessica had been her best friend since high school. The kind of friend who knew your coffee order, your mother's birthday, your passwords, both literal and emotional. Jessica had been there when Amanda's father died. When Amanda got her first rejection letter from Stanford. When she coded her first app in a college dorm. And Daniel. Daniel was the man Amanda had imagined raising children with. He had a smile that made her believe in small miracles. He proposed under the oak tree where they used to eat lunch every Wednesday. There had been champagne. There had been tears. Now there was just this. Amanda stood and walked to her desk. Her heels soundless on the soft carpet. She opened her laptop, opened her calendar. She stared at the line that said, "Final cake tasting with Daniel 2 p.m. She clicked, delete. Then she opened LinkedIn, clicked on her profile, clicked, deactivate. She opened Twitter, posted one final tweet, "I'll rebuild, but I won't warn next time." Then she logged off. That night, Amanda emptied her office. Her assistant found her an apartment in a city 4 hours away. She packed only what mattered, her backup drives, her notebooks, her running shoes. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. Not her board, not her mother, not even the dog walker who still had a spare key. Because sometimes grief isn't about screaming into the void. Sometimes it's about leaving before the echo comes back. The wedding venue tried to reach her. So did the caterer. Her inbox filled with subject lines like "Need to confirm guest count" and "Final payment reminder." She didn't open any of them. She changed her number. The headlines came a week later. Rising EdTech star Amanda Chen steps down mysteriously as co-founder Jessica Hart announces new venture. They used Amanda's photo in the article. Jessica gave an interview. She called Amanda brilliant and deeply inspirational. She credited her with the original idea. Said she wished Amanda well. Daniel never appeared in the press. Amanda watched from a burner account. Not out of masochism, but out of strategy. She studied what they were doing, what investors they were chasing, what schools they were trying to partner with. She kept a notebook, and on the first page, in ink she could barely read through her tears, she wrote, "The second build won't be for them to see." In the months that followed, Amanda faded. From the press, from the conferences, from the platforms that once called her next-gen tech royalty. But what no one realized was this. While Jessica and Daniel gave speeches on the main stage, Amanda was building backstage. And this time, the code was hers alone. And this time, no one had the password. The train that pulled Amanda into the quiet heart of Providence was nearly empty. She chose a seat by the window and watched as Boston dissolved into miles of gray, of old warehouses and rusted bridges, of exit signs and blinking billboards that promised futures she no longer believed in. Her face reflected faintly in the window, too thin, eyes too alert, as if trust had become a foreign shape her bones no longer remembered. She arrived with a suitcase, a laptop, and an idea she didn't dare say aloud yet. The apartment was small, bare floors, chipped tiles, a radiator that clanged like it resented being useful. But it had one thing Amanda hadn't felt in months: anonymity. No investors waiting for updates. No mentors asking for dinner debriefs. No friends measuring her by what she used to be. For the first time in years, she could disappear without having to explain. She picked up contract work to survive, back-end architecture for a recipe app in France, algorithm debugging for a non-profit in Kenya. Nothing too visible, nothing that asked her to show her face. She coded from her kitchen table at night, wrapped in an old sweatshirt and silence. The days passed in quiet routine. Mornings with coffee and a blank terminal. Walks at dusk through cobblestone streets no one had curated for Instagram. She deleted every calendar invite from her past life. Every birthday alert. Every saved wedding pin. Her world narrowed to keystrokes, commas, and sleep. But her mind, it wouldn't rest. The idea returned slowly, like an ache that wouldn't fully leave. A platform, not a company. This time, that would use machine learning to match students with low-cost, high-impact learning models. A space without ads, without performance dashboards, built not to scale, but to serve. She called it Stillmind. No launch date, no press, just code and quiet intention. She built the prototype alone over the course of 6 months. Every design decision came from her gut. Not a growth funnel. The UI was monochrome. The back end was seamless. The recommendation engine was gentle, unobtrusive. She wanted it to feel like a breath, not a broadcast. When she needed help, she reached out under an alias. Freelancers, contractors, all remote. No one saw her face. No one knew her name. They just followed the specs and delivered. In her 7th month, she got an email from an encrypted contact form on Stillmind's dormant landing page. The message read, "No pitch deck, no flash, just function. I like that. Keep going. R.B." There was no logo, no LinkedIn, just the initials, R. Blake. Attached was a wire transfer receipt. $50. Amanda stared at the screen for an hour. She almost didn't touch the money, almost marked it as spam. But something in the tone, sharp, dry, familiar with pain, kept her from deleting it. She replied, "Thanks, I'm not selling, just building." The response came the next morning. "Then build, on your terms." The correspondence didn't escalate, it matured. He never asked for meetings, never requested equity, just short, precise feedback after each update Amanda shared. Streamline the onboarding, add multilingual support. Your copy's trying too hard. Let the silence breathe. Over the next 6 months, the platform gained quiet momentum. Testers came through teacher referrals. Amanda built a dashboard for educators, not investors. Usage grew modestly, but retention was near 90%. RB sent more money, more notes, never a demand. Amanda began to sleep again. She built a tiny team, just 4 contractors and 1 part-time support lead. She told them only what they needed to know. They respected the silence. She bought plants, repaired the heater, found a bakery that reminded her of her childhood in Taipei. She stopped checking on Jessica and Daniel, not because she'd forgiven them, but because the version of her that they hurt had been replaced. She no longer needed to prove she had moved on. She simply had. One afternoon in late autumn, Amanda was closing her laptop when another message came through. You've built something rare. Let's talk. No cameras. No press. Just voice. It was signed, R. Blake, investor, parent, and someone who once lost everything too. Amanda stared at the message. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel watched. She felt seen. She replied, "Tomorrow, noon, call only, no expectations." She didn't rehearse what she would say. She didn't dress up. She brewed coffee and sat by the window as the call rang through. His voice was calm, low, British, maybe, or just softened by experience. He asked about her code, not her pitch. He asked what failure had taught her, not how she planned to scale. He asked how she was sleeping. Not once did he ask who had betrayed her. He simply offered, "If you want this to grow quietly, I'll help protect the silence." Amanda closed her eyes and whispered, "Okay." Amanda stood outside the conference hall in Geneva, her coat pulled tight around her and the soft drizzle dusting the glass awning above. She had come alone, no entourage, no press, no badge that bore her title. It was a closed-door summit for founders, by invitation only, and the name listed on hers wasn't even hers. Just a Ren, a whisper of who she had become after she left everything else behind. Stillmind had launched quietly 6 months earlier and somehow, in the absence of press releases and grand promises, it had grown. Teachers across 3 countries had adopted the platform. Parents emailed with gratitude. Donations trickled in from anonymous sponsors. But none had intrigued Amanda as much as the one who called himself R. Blake. He had supported her code in silence, contributed advice without ego, and wired money without ever once asking for her to give anything back beyond building with care. Until last week, when the email arrived. Geneva, Saturday, noon, room 312. "You don't have to say yes. But I'd like to meet the architect behind the quiet." She walked in and found a room filled not with startup bravado, but with soft lighting, leather-bound notebooks, and a single man standing beside a small table set with tea. He was older than she'd imagined. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. His hair was silver at the edges. Not with vanity, but time. His posture relaxed. When he looked up, his eyes didn't scan, didn't assess, they settled. "Amanda," he said. He didn't ask, just said it as if her name belonged in the room. "Richard," she replied. And for a moment, the room felt like the inside of a cello. Resonant, spacious, silent in a way that held sound rather than smothered it. He gestured to a chair. "Tea?" She nodded. He poured. "Jasmine. I didn't expect the man behind the code to also be the man behind this room." She said. "I didn't expect the woman behind the silence to answer." He returned, not smiling, but not cold either, just sincere. They didn't talk about equity, or projections, or runway. They spoke of frictionless design, of how children learn best when they feel safe, of how some systems weren't broken, they were designed to exclude. "I backed you," Richard said simply, "because you didn't ask to be seen. You asked to be left alone long enough to make something true." Amanda felt her throat tighten. She had been seen before, but it was always transactional, always an angle. This was something else. "You've done this before," she said. He nodded. "I invest in women who've been knocked down hard, not because they're a cause, but because they know how to build without applause." The next hour was a blur of quiet conversation, soft laughter, shared weariness. It was less a meeting and more a mirror. Amanda realized she didn't feel guarded around him, not because he disarmed her, but because he didn't try to. Over the next months, their conversations continued, at first by phone, then occasional lunches, always respectful, always unhurried. He sent her articles, she sent him code updates. He never crossed a line. And yet, somewhere between the commas of their conversations, affection bloomed, not like wildfire, but like ivy, quiet, strong, rooted. He never touched her without invitation, never asked about Daniel, never mentioned Jessica. When she spoke of betrayal, he listened without trying to fix it. When she didn't speak at all, he waited. "I didn't think I'd marry. Amanda said once, a year into their quiet companionship. Me neither, he replied. Then again, I didn't think I'd want to sit still long enough to watch someone exhale. They married in Provence, beneath a fig tree in the back garden of a restored monastery. 5 guests, no photographers, no designer gown. Amanda wore a linen dress she'd bought at a market in Marseille. Richard wore his late father's cufflinks. She didn't post about it, didn't tell the press, didn't even update her LinkedIn. But she did update her company's name, Rise and Learn, because it was never about rebirth through fire. It was about learning to rise without asking permission. One rainy Thursday morning, nearly 2 years to the day since her first silent email to a stranger named R. Blake, Amanda sat in her home office sorting through applications for a new role, content strategist. She clicked through resumes, most of them standard, and then, one email stood out. Subject: Application for content role. From j.hart@email.com. Amanda froze. She clicked. The cover letter began, I believe in second chances. And I believe in women who rebuild. No signature, just the attached resume. Jessica Hart. Amanda stared at the screen. Her pulse didn't rise. Her hands didn't shake. She just smiled, softly, calmly. She had built something Jessica could only apply to. And that was enough. Chapter 4: The interview she never expected. The morning air in the Rise and Learn headquarters was calm, cool, and laced with the faint scent of cedar and roasted espresso. Amanda sat in the conference room reviewing notes for the day's candidate interviews. She wore a navy blouse, understated earrings, and her hair pulled back in a simple knot. Nothing about her presence suggested rank. That was intentional. This role, content strategist, was key to the next expansion of Rise and Learn. The candidate pool was strong, but one name had surprised her: Jessica Hart. She hadn't recognized the email at first, but once she opened the resume, the voice in the cover letter, cloaked in phrases about rebuilding, authenticity, and learning through failure, was unmistakably Jessica. She hadn't changed her last name. Amanda didn't know whether that meant pride or inertia. Still, she had scheduled the interview. When Jessica walked into the room that morning, she didn't recognize Amanda. It had been 5 years. After all, Amanda looked different now, softer in some ways, sharper in others, her posture more relaxed, her eyes more curious than wounded. She stood, shook Jessica's hand, and said only, "Thanks for coming in." Jessica smiled, polished, professional, just enough charm to coat the nerves. "Thanks for having me." Amanda gestured to a seat and they began. The interview moved briskly through expected questions, prior experience, writing samples, her philosophy on educational communication. Jessica answered them smoothly, layering her responses with enough self-awareness to signal growth, enough polish to signal ambition. It wasn't until Amanda asked, "Tell me about a professional setback that shaped how you approach trust in the workplace," that Jessica paused. She inhaled. "There was a time when I got involved in something I shouldn't have. A relationship that compromised my judgment and cost me a role I loved." Amanda tilted her head. "How so?" Jessica looked down at her hands. For the first time, a crack in the veneer. "I was close with 2 co-founders at a startup. One of them, Daniel, I got involved with. It ended badly. The company folded. I lost a lot, not just professionally." She glanced up, forcing a smile. "But I learned. I really did. I'm not that person anymore." Amanda let the silence stretch. Then she asked, "What would you say to someone who once trusted you, and then lost everything because of that trust?" Jessica blinked. I'd say I was sorry, that I wish I could undo it. But I'd also say I've changed. I've worked hard. I'm trying to earn something back, not from them, just from the world." Amanda nodded. And then the door opened. Richard stepped in, holding a folder. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. Amanda rose slightly from her seat. "It's fine. This is Jessica Hart. She's interviewing for content strategy." Richard turned toward the table, and froze. Jessica turned too, and stilled. Recognition dawned. She looked at Richard, then at Amanda, then back again, and for a moment, she was no longer the poised professional in a buttoned blouse. She was the girl who had stood behind Amanda on her wedding day, clutching a bouquet and a secret. The girl who had kissed Amanda's fiancé while telling her she deserved better. But now, Amanda wasn't shattered. Now, she was seated across the table. Calm, clear-eyed. She hadn't announced herself as CEO. Hadn't reminded anyone of who she once was. She hadn't needed to. Because Jessica knew it all in the way Richard addressed Amanda with a glance that held deep familiarity. In the way Amanda had conducted the interview, not with vengeance, but with grace. Jessica stood abruptly. I didn't know. I didn't realize this company. Amanda smiled politely. Most applicants don't. Richard placed the folder on the table and quietly excused himself. Jessica watched him go, her face unreadable. Amanda folded her hands. The role is still open, she said, but perhaps this isn't the space you were expecting to walk into. Jessica opened her mouth, closed it. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." Amanda rose and extended her hand again. "For what it's worth, you did a good interview." Jessica shook it. Her hand trembled, and as she turned to leave the room, Amanda felt no anger, no hunger for revenge, only peace. She had become the kind of woman whose name didn't need to be announced. Because power that's rooted doesn't shout. It waits. And when the moment comes, it simply stands up, and is recognized. Amanda didn't reject Jessica in the room. She waited. 2 days after the interview, Jessica received an email. Subject: Interview follow-up. Thank you for your time. We've decided to move forward with another candidate. Wishing you clarity, growth, and the future you're working toward. Rise and learn. There was no mention of the past. No dagger dipped in passive aggression. Just a line drawn with grace. Impossible to misread. Jessica never replied. But 3 weeks later, Amanda's assistant forwarded her a Medium article titled, "How to Forgive the You Who Didn't Know Better." The byline read, "J. Hart." The subtitle, "Don't let the worst version of your past be the only thing that ever made you known." Amanda didn't share it, didn't comment. She was on a flight to Tokyo, mapping out the next expansion phase of Rise and Learn. 5 countries, 12 new partnerships, 30 mentors already onboarded. She had more important things to build. Richard sat beside her, reading quietly from his tablet. Occasionally, he'd glance sideways and smile. Amanda, half lost in spreadsheets, half lost in memory, felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself in years. Safety. Later that evening, they sat on the balcony of their hotel suite overlooking the skyline. Neon shimmered off the river below, and Tokyo pulsed softly in the distance like a metronome. Amanda opened her laptop. On the screen, a new landing page draft. Next chapter, mentorship for women betrayed by business and love. She was building again, but this time, not alone. Richard set his wine glass down. "You're going to change a lot of lives." She leaned against his shoulder. "Not change, just remind that it's okay to rise quietly. That power doesn't need an audience." He nodded, wrapping his arm around her. And in that moment, Amanda realized, she didn't want Jessica to hurt. She didn't even want her to regret. She just wanted her far enough away that she'd never again hold the pen Amanda used to write her own life. Because Jessica had once taken her blueprint. But Amanda had built the skyscraper. And from the top floor, there was no need to look down.